Differences between ORCID ID and Researcher ID. ORCID ID versus Researcher ID. The ORCID stands for Open Researcher and Contributor ID is a non-proprietary alphanumeric code to uniquely identify authors and contributors of scholarly communication. ORCID's website and services to look up authors and the bibliographic output. Whereas Researcher ID is used to feed records for your publications from Web of Science to symplectic elements. Respected source of citation metrics including citation counts and H-index. ORCID aims is to provide a persistent code for humans, whereas Researcher ID aims is to solve problem of author identification, correct attribution of works. ORCID is a persistent identity for humans, similar to tax ID numbers, that are created for content-related entities on digital networks by Digital Object Identifiers, DOI. Your ORCID ID connects with your ORCID record that can contain links to your research activities, affiliations, awards, other versions of your name, and more. Whereas the ID related to the Web of Science database temporarily was part of the Publins platform. Initially, create a Researcher ID, search for publications in the Web of Science, and match them with the identifier that is to create your own publication profile on the Web of Science. First stage in creating profile of ORCID ID is go to the For Researchers page, enter your details and follow the prompts under Register for an ORCID ID. And second stage in creating profile of ORCID ID is import your publication records from your Scopus or Researcher ID profile. Whereas first stage in creating profile of Researcher ID is to register with Researcher ID by clicking on the Join Now, it's free button and follow the prompts. If you already have an EndNote Web or Web of Science account, use the same password for each of these resources. Second stage in creating profile of Researcher ID is to search for your publications in Web of Science. Select publications that are yours and save to Researcher ID. I wrote these publications from the drop-down list. Default label is Save to EndNote Online. ORCID is persistent identifier for academics, has advantages for scholars' online visibility, the efficiency of manuscript submission and grant application processes and registration of research output in the Research Information System. Whereas Researcher ID, as a self-registered identifier, will be provided whenever a researcher finishes registration in the Researcher ID database. The identifier was the combination of alphabets and numbers, with the last four numbers representing the year registered. ORCID ID allows you by providing researchers with a free unique identifier, an ORCID ID and a mechanism for linking their research outputs and activities to their ORCID ID, whereas Researcher ID allows you to create an online profile for showcasing your publication history. It is designed to associate you with your scholarly work, thus assuring an accurate record of output and attribution. ORCID was introduced in 16 October 2012, whereas Researcher ID was introduced in January 2008. Number of digits in ORCID ID are 16, whereas number of digits in Researcher ID are 9. Example of ORCID ID and Researcher ID are given for help. The websites of ORCID ID and Researcher ID are given for help. Kindly subscribe my YouTube channel Thesis Helper. Thanks for watching.